We are now approaching Harwich International.
Hey cool kids, you're back with Andrew at the Beat Motel podcast.
Between the train and the platform edge.
Oh, thanks for the warning.
Please take care when leaving the train.
I absolutely will. So you're back with Andrew, the Beat Motel podcast, and as if that announcement wasn't enough of a giveaway, we're going somewhere today to meet someone very special.
Alle voertuigterrein- en buspassagiers worden vriendelijk verzocht nu te
We're here.
ontsteken via de
What a lovely
Rotterdam
crossing.
op dek 9.
Good night's sleep too. Hey cool kids, I'm just interjecting here, clearly making the audio in a different style so you know that it's recorded separately, and I'm leaning next to the washing machine so you can also hear that this is an insert, I think we'll call it. Right, the next bit of audio you're going to hear is kind of a field recording of me and Jack, my daughter and one of his daughters, basically mucking around on a pedestrian crossing in Rotterdam. Safely, of course, there was no actual cars around. But why am I including this? Well, it's because I've recently discovered that one of my good friends who is a master, a black belt of field recording, has started a podcast. His name is Stuart Bowditch, and I heartily recommend you look up his podcast. It's quite magical. He makes field recordings of glamorous places like Peterborough train station, and they're such lovely little vignettes. I thoroughly recommend it. I first listened to it and I was walking through a park in Ipswich, and I listened to one that had traffic noise from central London, which was a bit confusing, sensory wise. But anyway, link in the description, link in the show notes, or whatever you want to call that bit. But here we go. Here is me, Jack Supermerger, and our kids mucking about with a heavy metal sounding alarm on a pedestrian crossing in Prinsenplaats in Rotterdam.
He said, okay, because there's a...
Where's it coming from? Oh, here it goes fast. You need to stop the bears. Not this.
No, there's like a lot of... why the bin's so weird in Yellowstone? Because there's a surprising overlap between the stupidest humans and the cleverest bears.
There's a breakdown. I'm here with somebody who I've come to see, and tell me what your name is.
Hello, I'm Jack Hagley, and I've been seen by Andrew.
I see you. Who says that? Is that Marianne Hobbs?
I have no idea.
Marianne Hobbs, I see you. So Jack, I've known about for quite a long time, and originally I heard a few tracks by an act called Atom Clap,
Right.
and that must have been quite a few years ago.
Yep.
And then when we met, you said, hey, I've got a new thing called Supermerger. So I'm guessing there was some air between the two things. Why did Atom Clap come to an end and Supermerger begin?
Well, Supermerger was is just a way for me to kind of put together a lot of my different interests. So it would be like art and design and music, whereas Atom Clap was always more of a kind of let's make some party music just for the hell of it kind of stuff. And you know, Supermerger was meant to be like a one name catches all for basically all of my creative output, which I'm still using today.
I should just say where we are, because it was really quiet here until a minute ago. Now there's loads of traffic. Jack, where are we? Where in the world are we?
We're standing in the middle of the M25.
Yeah.
We're in Rotterdam. We're near Prinsenland, which is a place in kind of northern Rotterdam.
Aha, and it's very, very nice here. We've spent the day cycling around the forest trying to stay out the sun because it's very, very hot. Anyway, back to Supermerger. So yeah, when I first saw you perform, visuals were a very large part of it, and with any sort of electronic music, I think anything that takes it beyond person standing behind desk doing emails is always a good thing. But there was something, I'm going to ask you a really difficult question here, there was something particularly interesting about the way you went about it. What do you think it was that I thought was interesting?
Oh God, I really don't know.
I realise there's no way.
Loaded question.
There's no way of answering that without sounding like a real egotist. I'll tell you, you'd written the code.
Yeah. I mean, the Supermerger is also involves creative coding and involves other things that aren't design and music, and it's for me, Supermerger is not necessarily like the act. It's more like a genre, and it's a one-person genre, and it's my genre, and it just it includes everything that I do, and that includes code. Yeah, so the code in that was to do with, you're talking about a particular project that I did back in the day, and it was actually named by, it didn't have a name, and it was named by Ryan Jordan, who called it Infinite Ascension, and I thought that was a great thing, because essentially it is about tension, and it's about the way that in dance music there's often a drop where all of that tension gets released. And I was interested in thinking about, well, what happens if we have this tension and we just keep building the tension and building it and building it and building it, and it never releases, and it just stops, like the thing just stops instead, and everybody is left on this horrible kind of edging high which lasts for about 15 minutes, which I thought was about the right amount of time before people would get totally bored of the whole thing. But so that Infinite Ascension thing is a combination of a music soundtrack which is based around the almond break, which is a very classic kind of sample from Jungle, and that starts off at 20 BPM, and then because of Ableton it goes up to 999 BPM. It takes about 15 minutes to kind of ramp up. It slowly gets faster and faster and faster, and the coding part controls the visuals, so it has these very intense kind of visuals which start off just as my logo, and then it just gets more and more intense as it goes through until it's just basically a horrible flashing screen in primary colours designed to, I don't know, give people a stroke or something like that.
Well, if it's kind of comes from the school of Ryan Jordan, then giving somebody a stroke is quite possible, I think.
Well, I played with Ryan Jordan as his kind of support act I think I did about 3 shows with him where we organised ourselves, so my thing would be on, and then there would be almost no gap at all. So he would come straight on afterwards with his flashing lights. Possession
Trance, wasn't it? So Possession Trance was the largest strobe I've ever seen, like a strobe that would bring down light aircraft, room full of acrid smoke. It was not like haze like you'd normally get on stage. And well, the first time I saw him perform that, I was so affected I had to go home. So I can see that the build-up of that is really good. But really interesting me is the visuals. The visual aspect of it was, I wouldn't say it's panic-inducing, but because it was geometric shapes that were intensifying and building. How the hell do you code something like that?
Well, geometric stuff is kind of easy, to be honest. I mean, you just like rotate stuff around around the center. That's basically it. So it's a lot of it, pretty much all of it is just, I have a thing about doing very central compositions, and I kind of do that a lot with my work. And I don't know, kind of like recognizing it and also kind of fighting against it a little bit. But how do I code that? I mean, yeah, it's just geometric stuff is just rotating things around a central point. That's kind of it's a bit of an easy trick to kind of get things to look regular in a certain kind of way. I mean, to be honest, the most difficult thing about doing it is just getting it to work really fast, and because there is elements of that which is actually reactive to the music as well.
I was going to say that we're not talking about, perhaps somebody making a film that goes along with the music, because the music, if I remember rightly, wasn't structured. I mean, it's clearly not verse, chorus, but it's not structured and strict in a way. It does ebb and flow and peak and trough, and the visuals always seem to be very linked to that.
I mean, I'm going to ruin it here for you, but it is kind of quite structured.
No, that's fine. That's cool. In fact, making music sound very loose and flowing when it is structured. I'm in a band that does that. That's kind of the greatest trick. It's the Kaiser Soze of music.
I mean, honestly, the music is just, what I found is that I needed to structure it into 3 parts. So it would be a part where it's kind of slower at the beginning and kind of lulling people into a kind of a false sense of security, and then there's kind of a section in the middle where it's what you might call an acceptable BPM, so that would range somewhere between maybe 75 and perhaps 200, and that will be the kind of bulk of it. But past 200 BPM, it's like very hard to kind of know that it's music anymore. Kind of like whatever it is just sort of turns into a tone. And so like the last 5 minutes is basically it just going from 200 to nearly 1,000 BPM, because it's just I don't know, it just seems to make sense in that kind of way, like for that to happen. I think many people, when they see it for the first time, they're not really ready for it, and that's what I quite like. They think it's going to stop at some point and turn into I think the bass is going to come in and it's going to drop, but it never really does.
It's a tease, and as it say, it's like, I don't know, being halfway through sex and just standing up, putting your trousers on and wandering off.
Yeah, it's almost like a tantric version of music. Like, I mean, there's bits of it which is like the structure in terms of the BPM, like that is kind of done on an envelope because it's the best way to do it. I found like through rehearsals that I would never quite time it right in terms of like how long I wanted it to be, and that I was always finishing like a lot sooner than I wanted to, and like watching it back as an audience member and going, yeah, this isn't annoying enough. You know, it needs to be harder to experience. But one thing is, like, it's all like in terms of the coding thing, it's all runs on this kind of sensitivity, and the sensitivity part like can't really, I mean, it's like having modular synths and things which are like, you know, affected by temperature, but this is more affected by the setup and the things that you put into the system. So basically I have to kind of make it less and more sensitive because of the audio, like the reactive parts of the visuals. So constantly kind of having to like adjust the intensity of the music, but also the intensity of the visuals, because I don't want it to be accidentally too intense at the beginning and ruin the...
So it's not a passive thing at all then. So listener, you probably understand that as an interviewer I have to ask questions about things that I've figured out to a certain extent. But I was always interested that I assumed you were just steering and controlling the visuals. I mean, this is not a dumb passive visual performance, is it?
I found that there's like, I only have like two hands, and I found like in the beginning when I was programming the system, I had a lot more control over what was happening, but I actually found that was like, it's really hard to do the visuals and the sound with one person, and that I needed to kind of make it like, you know, really simple to use, that I could do it when I was maybe a little bit drunk and at a gig, and that, you know, just having, you know, one, because I can't do all of it at the same time without turning my back to the audience or whatever, and I don't know. It's I don't know. It sounds more complicated than it is, but I had to kind of offset a lot of the complexity and hide it from myself, if that makes any sense.
It does make a lot of sense. I think you're hinting at something that always really interests me with electronic musicians, is that because you're using several tools to express yourself on stage, that, for example, if I'm playing bass or guitar on stage, and it's quite easy because you're physically connected to the vibrating machine that's making the music. With electronica, keeping that connection emotionally is quite difficult. So steering it while you're on stage, trying to do that with any objectivity must be impossible. It must be 100% subjective to how you feel on stage, not how the audience is reacting.
Yeah, I mean, like the experience of performing music is very different from the experience from listening to music, and being in the audience is very different from being on stage, and you can't really judge either experience from either place without. So I don't know, I wanted to make it so I could feel comfortable on stage, because the truth is I don't have like massive amounts of experience being on stage, but I wanted to make the stage into a place where I felt comfortable, like doing things, you know, doing these things, doing performances. I mean, the big problem with that really is kind of confidence, and the truth is that I'm just not really a musician at all. Like, I'm, you know, I produce music, I would like I sequence music and I compose things, but when it comes to actually being on stage, like I have to kind of use my kind of abilities to invent systems where I'm going to feel confident doing it. I'm not going to feel silly doing it, and that I can hopefully make it so people watching are going to enjoy it too. But yeah.
I get it. Now we've talked in reality about one quite small part of your output, because you've turned your attention to creating albums, like a lot of people have. I don't want to say because of COVID, because I kind of foresaw it in your arc as an artist anyway. But what inspired the transition to making actual albums as pieces of work?
What inspired the transition? I mean, I think it's just I was doing a lot of singles and a lot of bits and pieces, but I found that I was like making a lot of fragments of things that kind of could be bigger things. I would make a melody and then I would find that I would have quite a few different variations with it, and that perhaps I didn't always want to use the editing process to decide like which one was necessarily more valid or better than any of the others. Like they could all be used in different ways, but at the same time I did want to kind of like filter down the number of instruments and the number of influences and things that I was using in the work. So yeah, I mean the album which we're talking about is Shiro, which is kind of an experimental, it's a concept album. It's got elements of kind of ambient, and it is kind of like, if there's two genres of dance music, I mean there's kind of listen at home dance music and dance in a club dance music, I guess those are the two ways of partitioning it out. It kind of has elements of both, but it's definitely more listen at home kind of stuff. And yeah, it just comes a lot from my interest in science fiction, and I had this idea of like working to a kind of a set brief in terms of like each of the tracks will have like a set BPM, which is kind of like decided beforehand, and it would have like a set key which is decided beforehand. The length is kind of up to myself, but then each of the tracks as well would have like a short phrase which would be connected to it, or like some kind of imagery which connected to it, which is hopefully will tell a story. And with those kind of restrictions, it was kind of easier to keep myself on track and actually to finish a thing and to make it hopefully feel like a whole thing, rather than just being, I mean there's a lot of tracks which I hear from, a lot of albums which I hear from various artists, and I think, well, maybe these are just all tracks that were finished at the same time, rather than tracks which were kind of composed in the same breath. And I mean that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just not what I wanted to do.
I think it might be something that some people might accuse of it being connected to our age. I know that you're younger than I am, but for me an album is still an album. It's a snapshot of time. It's a piece of work, and I'm not a huge fan of the putting out singles thing. I mean, I do it myself, but there's something so satisfying. It's like writing a novel compared to a short story.
Oh yeah, it's a bit more self-indulgent perhaps.
That's it. Yeah, that's fine. This is one of those things like pretension. People go, "Oh, I don't like pretentious music." I'm like, we'd be fucked without pretentious music.
Yeah, I mean, I like to listen to music to stroke my beard too. I mean, why not? No, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'm a bit wrong-footed by all of this. Yeah, I mean, definitely, I could be. Yeah. Thing is that if you want to do something, you just need to do it, and like worrying about whether something is pretentious or not is kind of a surefire way to kind of short circuit yourself and never really do anything. It has to be what you want to do.
I'd say that's a pretty good summary. I think that has summed up the whole thing quite nicely. Is there anything you want to add before we sign off?
Thank you for having me. I hope it's not been boring for anybody.
Now we're going to do something which we haven't yet done on the Beat Motel podcast, because we're normally in danger of having our knuckles wrapped by various licensed things, but I'm going to put you under pressure and say, can we play a whole of one of your track at the end of this episode?
Would you mean a whole of one of my tracks?
Well, we can only normally play 30 seconds because of licensing issues. Can we play a whole track?
Yeah, you can play a whole track. Yeah.
There you go. He can't take it back now.
You can keep it.
Thank you, Jack. I really appreciate it. And we're going to go, hopefully, find somewhere a bit cooler than where we are now. I'm going to say goodbye. Do you want to say goodbye?
Goodbye.
Another quick audio insert before we play the next bit. This track is called Heavy White. I didn't name the track because at the time that I was in Rotterdam, the track wasn't finished. But here we go. Heavy White by Supermerger.
Hoek van Holland Haven. Rolstoelgebruikers en minder validen dienen de uitgang richting de Stena-lijn te gebruiken. U kunt hier overstappen op de bus en de ferry naar Engeland.
Wheelchair users and disabled persons should use the exit towards the Stena line. Change here for the bus and the ferry to England.
Station Hoek van Holland Haven.
So cool, kids. What did you think of that? What did you think of Supermerger and Jack Hagley? Did you enjoy the track? Let us know. Really liked doing these kind of interviews where we slightly put someone under pressure, but in quite a fun way. Who else would you like to speak to? We don't just deal with metal and electronica. We're a broad church here. If somebody's got an interesting story, we want to speak to them. Right, so that's it. I've got to head back to Britain now. Thanks for listening, cool kids. Thanks for listening to another episode of Beat Motel. Please remember to like, subscribe, and all that shit, because it makes a big difference to us. Thank you very much. Hey, we don't have exit music, so instead I'm just going to go bye-bye.